Well, hello and welcome to the STEM Space podcast. I am your host, Claire. Natasha is out today, but I have a special guest with us from the Live Lab at Texas A&M University. And we have actually had guests from this specific program twice before. This is the first time on the STEM Space that we've had somebody from the same organization back for a third time. And it's because we just love it so much and we think it is so wonderful. So if you've missed the first two episodes from the Live Lab, we had Andre Thomas at the time in episode 65 and 110. Go check those out if you're interested in some game-based learning and to learn more about that. But today we have special guest who is the current Live Lab director, Aaron Thibault. Aaron, thank you so much and welcome to the STEM Space.
Claire, thank you so much. Very happy to be here. Appreciate the invite. Is this like
Absolutely.
a Saturday Night Live recurring cast? If Andre was on twice, I'll have to really set something up so that he can't beat me in how many appearances he has. But appreciate it. We're very competitive in the gaming world, so
Oh, I
I need
see that.
I need
Yes.
to remember
Well,
that.
definitely. I will be keeping score on any points. Certain jokes are always welcome. And yeah, definitely be keeping score for that you and Andre competition there. But thank you so much for being here. And our audience loves learning about what you do. But first, can you kind of share about who you are and what you do with the Live Lab?
Absolutely. So I've been at the Live Lab at Texas A&M going on 2 years now. I joined A&M after leaving a video game company that I helped build up over 17 years called Gearbox. And I've been in the game industry and academia and research around games and game-based learning for 30 years. Very interested in the interdisciplinary nature of how games improve people's lives or can improve people's lives. And learning and behavior to me is the core of where games really can have and do have the biggest impact and can set people up for success in their lives through researching topics around games and through the play of well-structured games. So what I do here is direct our student researchers and collaborate with faculty researchers and scientists both here at Texas A&M and at many other institutions as well. And we do quite a bit with DoD types of training, particularly those around acquisition of new skills, areas of otherwise unstructured learning, and decision making. And I think games are excellent for those areas. So I direct overall what we do, and then I engage specifically in topics where I think that I can add value.
That is amazing. And there's so many students of mine. I've taught STEM from pre-K all the way through 10th grade. And so many of my students, when they talk about what they want to do with their life, has to do with video games. And so usually that's something that parents will be like, please help me dissuade them from being so focused on video games. But I would say there's always a place. There's a place for that. And if they're really interested in it, they can have that as a career that adds a lot of value. So it sounds like that's what you've done. So I would love to hear more about the topics that you are most interested in and what you do at the Live Lab. You've said some words that I'm not real familiar with what that exactly means, like decision making and well-structured games, that I would love to hear more about what you mean by that.
Absolutely. First, I would say video games are one of those miraculous things that young people are very excited about because of the experiences they have with them and the time that they want to spend with them. And even more so, the stories that they want to tell each other about experiences that they had playing games. And they create appointments. They look forward to the next time that they get to play a game with friends or family. maybe they get the opportunity to use them in schools for different things. So where games really excel in young people's lives is in critical thinking skills and applications of the what if scenarios that students come up with. They might diagnose something they don't love about a game, something, they'll talk about some feature or a couple of features that they love about a game, or some new event that occurred when they were playing Fortnite, or who knows. But games provide something that lots of other things in their lives may not be giving them, which is meeting them where they are and the ability to connect with each other to share that excitement without it being pushed onto them. They are pulling, they're not being pushed to go do
Mm.
things. Now, as far as the topics that you asked about, so first with decision making, I like to research areas of tactical decision making and general decision making under stress, which has biological components and has emotional, mental, and then structural components around how we make decisions. I've been researching and creating games in an R&D fashion in that domain since the late 90s, and was able to apply work that I did on the first massive multiplayer game, Ultima Online, where we created online communities. And I focused on things like retaining those communities and reducing churn, which was an enormously complex game to play. And what we learned from that, I wanted to apply into other areas of learning in the world, and had the opportunity to build a lab at the University of Texas, that other Texas institution, in the early 2000s. And there took what we learned from creating these complicated games for players in an online community and apply them to at that time, the Army was undergoing digital transformation. They were adopting all these new digital systems, moving from analog to digital. And what was fortunate was they had a prescribed method for decision making called the military decision making process, that 7-step process. You can flow chart it all out and you can understand it, and then you can model that decision making process in a game that provides players or learners the opportunity to show that they know how to make decisions using many information inputs, distilling them. In this case, our learners were simulating being at the front lines of a battlefield in a tactical operations center. And so we would create lots of scenarios, some of which were very grounded and realistic, and things that would be that these learners would be expected to experience as staff decision makers, like battle captains and iron majors at that time. And we would put them into scenarios that would stretch their comfort level in order to have them be exposed to these new technologies as a way of doing business, which they hadn't done before, and then immediately provide back feedback so that they could see how efficient their decision making was, to protect their forces, their fielded forces, and new forces coming in, and joint and merged forces in these joint areas. And so it was the combination of kind of the unknown environment that they might be going to go work in. So um, these were learners who had not gone overseas yet to conduct these operations. They were still on base pre-deployment, and then after they were deployed and were beginning to learn lessons of what's happening in these scenarios in the real world, we're able to recreate our scenarios for new pre-deployment um, soldiers to experience. And again, going through, where does the decision making loop need to be faster? What new types of information do we need to be able to process? What are the tactics the other side's using? What are the tactics so it's this like emerging battle space idea that we were creating games for, which we're kind of doing again now 20 plus years later, as we're preparing for other kind of emergent things to occur in new battle spaces. games. And you had, what was the other one that you had a question about?
You talk about well-structured games.
Right. So that's a big topic. I'll just say games that are created with intent. So there's a designer's or a directorial intent that goes into a game. Well, that intent can be close to purely entertainment focused, or it can be more complex and include learning goals, which is how we create game-based learning, structured game-based learning, which uses things like scaffolded curriculum development processes, um, that appreciates and respects how learners learn, both pedagogically, and since we do quite a lot with adults, andragogically, and looking at near real-time context feedback for adults who tend to really crave that kind of reward loop, and to use that. I mean, there are so many examples of games and game-like things in the world, like a Duolingo, for example, that has gamified some topic, in that case, language learning, and instituted a reward loop design and series of mechanisms for showing players where they are, the context of their journey in their learning path. So I'd say that's a well structured game for language learning. There are many other examples of learning things, whether it's calculus, like when you had Andre on before, I would guess he talked about variant limits, which we've just released a study of it, showing the impact of learners practicing calculus using that game, to other things like airfield operations, operating in control towers, or nuclear power plant operations, or managing a city. There's many examples of that. And then there's other kinds of structured games which are intended to help players uh, create a sense of empathy within themselves, to as kind of a journey of self-discovery through experiences that they discover through playing a game. Um, there's a game called Train, is one of the examples that I could point to around that, made by Brenda Brathwaite, now Brenda Romero, that's talked about quite a bit. Mechanic is the Message series that she developed, is a part of her development of Train. And in that game, players are simply told to move pawns around on a train to create the most efficient, kind of packed in, method of transporting people as possible. And then dark twist. So this goes with the empathy concept. You find out as a player that you're doing this in a Nazi train operation. And I know that's a triggering word, and I apologize, but in order to create a sense of empathy that was absolutely unexpected for the player, absolutely it produced the result that she was looking for. So it was a very well structured game, in that what you have to do to actually evoke a sense of empathy in a person is very difficult, it's maybe um, structurally kind of low hanging fruit, I'd say, because most people would agree that doing that kind of operation, then find out why you're doing it, would evoke an emotional response in many people. But you could then extrapolate that to many other kinds of tasks people might have that could produce a psychological result. So we do quite a lot around psychological research as well.
That's really interesting. I had never thought about that perspective of the empathy piece in gaming. And having not been raised around video games myself and not being really familiar with the different platforms, is you talk a lot about this feedback loops or these reward loops. Are the lessons learned, are they explicitly stated at the end of games, or is it more you can reflect afterwards and say, "Oh yeah, I guess I did learn this." Or is there, how do
Right.
you gauge what that should look like?
And it widely varies. So if we look at authorial intent and what the designer intends for the player to take away from having played their game, sometimes it's very clear. um, you either rescued the princess or you didn't. um, or you have the high score. Some games are effectively infinitely played until the game becomes difficult to the point that you just can't keep playing. Dude, maybe the speed is increased, like Space Invaders, or a Pac-Man, or a game like that, where the leaderboard, the scoreboard, is the thing that matters. Who has the highest score. um, Sometimes the statistics of what you've done in the game are presented to you, and you focus on the area of those statistics that you find most interesting. That tends to be true in games that are highly competitive and used as esports, so that players who play on, say, a team for esports, whether it's a Valorant, or it could be a Fortnite, or there's any number of Apex Legends, many games, even a game like a Call of Duty that supports team play for duos or quads, so 2-player teams or 4-player teams. You want to know, how can I be the best position player in my team? And if we're really good, then we have a strategy, and we get into the tactics of it, and our communication is great. And those games tend to give you very detailed statistics about what you've done in the game, so that you can assess your abilities. Um, there are in the world of game-based learning, there are games like one that we use for math education called Prisms, which WestEd released a research study on. Showed about a half standard deviation or more. In fact, I think with Prisms, it was closer to almost 2/3, like up in the close to zero point 0.7 standard deviation range, of showing improvements of math learning in young people in VR using the software. The exact same content that they were learning at that age level. In their class, but just the fact that it was VR, and had been scaffolded in such a way within the software, um, uh, was able to show deeper levels of learning and retention, and then ability, performance on tests subsequent to the VR based training. And those games do show back to the learner. In both immediate context, you either understand how to apply an equation, or able to use a concept, and so repetition is included, because games can also be infinitely patient and have infinite time for the learner. um, and then release that learner back into their, say, real world classroom with others, to have a kind of debrief session, group learning, and sharing with their instructor. And we find that to be highly effective. So then there are other games. You play the game, you have a feeling having played the game, but you don't. It's up to you to decide what that experience was all about. And that's where really deep conversations come into play between players. What was that all about? What is my takeaway? There's a game we use in my game design class called the Stanley Parable, which has many endings, and a narrator who narrates to you, including about many moments of surprise in the game, where the narrator is also surprised. So you're kind of on this journey with the narrator in a way. But at the end, especially when you get to these many different endings, it's often up to you as the player to decide, what did that mean. And there are many games like that are kind of open-ended, and the open-endedness for those kind of games often is a hook to bring you back into the game, um, because it doesn't feel like you experienced the end. It feels like you're still on the journey overall of playing the game, just like life.
That's really interesting. And I could see it's uh, maybe there is some sort of logic flow in determining what type of game you need for certain learning outcomes, I would assume. And And you talk a little bit about how virtual reality plays a role in a lot of these games as well. Is there a specific type of game that almost requires some virtual reality to hit the learning targets that you're looking for?
That's a great question. So VR, we studies have shown that simply learning a thing in VR, if it's a well-structured experience, is going to deepen the learning because um, you are experiencing it firsthand. And so we would call that situated learning. So you have situated experiential learning in VR where you are able to transport yourself into the environment in which you're conducting that learning. And as a result, now you have the ability to safely experience things which might otherwise be dangerous, or safely experience things which otherwise might be psychologically difficult for you as a player. Um, VR games or VR, game like simulations are used to help treat people who have had traumatic experience like psychological distress, to revisit situations or prepare for situations after trauma that that would be very difficult to replicate in the real world. In particular, as I said, games have infinite patience, so would be difficult to provide the quantity and depth of experience that can happen in VR. Now, VR is great for medical training. It's much easier to work on a simulated person for surgery and diagnosis and things like that than it is on real people. It's great for learning how to operate heavy machinery, which is very dangerous to operate in the real world, especially when there's no, kind of rails on the real world experience. But in VR, obviously, we can do that. It's very, very useful when you want to have remote embodied learning. So we do that with our math tutors. We have tutors that we hire from STEM colleges, particular engineering, math, and mathematics instruction. And those students put on their headsets and interact with our middle school and high school students we work with up in the Dallas area. And that way we can have a one to many with our tutors to large numbers of students, math tutoring instruction, which otherwise is not possible. And that's particularly great for rural areas or anywhere where it's difficult to find instructors for STEM topics. And so we can have this feeling of in person instruction and tutoring, even though the live instructor with that synchronous experience is remote. So, and there are many other areas where VR is the preferred and better method for instruction, but I think those are just a few.
That's really neat. When I was in the classroom, I tried to utilize some VR and AR for certain topics, and that really brought things to life. Specifically, when you would talk about subjects that being in a rural area where nothing that my students have ever seen before and experienced. And there's something different about looking at a textbook and seeing things versus seeing it right in front of you and feeling like you could hold it. So I definitely think that if there's an educator that hasn't utilized AR or VR, that would be something you should look into. Um, but specifically for the live lab, can you talk a little bit about some projects that you're currently working on and maybe some ways that educators out there might be able to get involved or access to some of these things?
Absolutely. So we just piloted over the summer a program we call Vertex, VR Texas, VRTEX. And in that program, we've partnered with Region 10, so Region 10 ESC, the service center for the North Texas region. And we created using, in this case, Meta Quests, we had a large number of quests that were donated to us by Accenture, and then Region 10 in their Gear Up program was able to acquire many new quests. We've created the ability to centrally manage those as a fleet, and with a STEM education focus. So we are now looking to begin expanding the use of this program where we have math and science, VR products, one of which is Prisms. We're partnered with Prisms. As far as I know, we're the only organization that's able to offer that outside the typical school day. But that has to do with our IRB approved study, where we're looking at the effect of not just the use of focused STEM learning software in VR, but also the play of games, in particular competitive games. So we're also partnered with a video game publisher called Beyond Frames and their developer Cortopia. They have a game called Wands Alliances, which is a 3 versus 3 competitive multiplayer game in VR. And our students learn math. They go through core content for mathematics instruction at their grade level, and then they work with tutors. And that one-to-many model that I described, we're now looking at beginning to include computer science and logic instruction as well with another company's products. We're on continuously assessing the efficacy of different softwares that we can use in our program. And then those students work in a cohort model to play these competitive games together to create that bonding experience between them that then sets them up for even better conversations about the mathematics instruction they've had. So we're studying that. We have many headsets that we can lend to districts if they're not looking to purchase their own. And we have built a model to scale up hiring tutors from the university here and other universities. If at some point we discover, even though we're the largest campus, that we don't have enough tutors to hire, we will go out and hire tutors in other locations. And we think that creates a really excellent longitudinal research and longitudinal program for students to stick with it. In the program right now in Region 10, those students will hold on to those headsets and they will travel with them as they progress across grade levels. So we'll be able to see the effect of this program from 7th grade through the time that they graduate high school.
Wow, that's really neat. So we'll drop some links in our show notes about how teachers can learn more about how they can get involved in some of these programs, just to be a part of that research and access to tutoring sounds really amazing, especially with all of the benefits that you've described in being able to utilize what you do to learn better. So that's amazing. I want to pivot just a little bit as we round out this episode. I would love to hear more about your journey. I know you may not have hours to describe your whole life story, but if you could just briefly describe your journey and how you got to where you are and why you became so interested in what you do.
Absolutely. Thank you, and thank you for the question. It is. I will do my best to distill that in that journey, because it has been kind of a wandering path. On the one hand, I've always had the goal of having the biggest impact possible, to help people improve their lives and their living conditions. I don't know. That's something that was instilled in me from the time I was very, very young. And I had the great fortune to be raised in a household where no matter what my interest was, there was someone near me who could provide mentoring and instruction. I lived in a house with my grandparents and my mother and other family members, veterans, professors, entrepreneurs. And so as I was learning math and science, my grandfather, who was a nuclear physics professor and owned a general contracting and engineering company and was a World War II vet, was there. And then I was interested in art. Well, my grandmother was a treasurer for the Rhode Island Watercolor Society, and would take me to learn about oil painting and drawing and do plein air, outside. My mom was in culinary arts and entrepreneur. She was a restaurateur. So I was cooking, and basically working for her from the time that is as early as I can remember. Uh, and there's a lot of science in cooking and baking. I'll tell you. So I had that fortune, and it occurs to me not everybody has those kind of opportunities around them as they're learning, and there was a lot of computer usage around the house as well. So I started programming with the TRS-80 when, I don't know, I think I was 6 or 7 years old, maybe. And before you could save your programs, we didn't get the version, we didn't pick up the cassette deck that would let you save from day one. That didn't come till later. And so over time, as I was interacting with friends as we moved around the country, and I saw the types of learning experiences that I was having and that they were having, it occurred to me there had to be a better way for us to learn. We would get together and play video games, and a lot of times when my friends and I were together, this would be like a study session, and we would talk about things that we were learning in school while we were playing games. And um, at that time, I didn't know you could be a game designer or a developer, and there were no schools for this. Fast forward, as I was going through my education at UT, I kept finding my way into these experimental classes that were using games or online frameworks to reinforce rhetoric and composition, or political science, or film studies, things like that. And um, uh, I was pretty involved with with friends in the music industry at that time. So I paid my way through school. I was doing promotions and such, and I was able to apply what I was doing in music through a film professor introduced me to his son. So nepotism's not bad. I would say if you can work your personal network, do it. So his son was a creative director on a game called Wing Commander, which I had grown up playing the earlier versions of. And I was able to get my foot in the door on the music side, but because I was aware of in school and was interested in other things around programming and technology and animation, I was able to kind of carve out a role doing all of those things at a studio called Origin. And I mentioned I worked on the first massive multiplayer game. I also happen to be fortunate because that game was in early design at the time that I joined that company. Um, and in that game, as I said, it was very complicated. It was a complicated game for people to play. So that got me thinking, how do we keep players in the game? What can we create as mechanisms to educate and to socialize these communities of players, to have a mentoring structure within the game? And we created a group of players who were mentors in the game called the Dragons, the Ultimate Dragons, and that was really powerful, actually. And they had their own prestige and status to go with them. Um, I left from Origin shut down. EA, it's a very normal thing to happen in the game industry, unfortunately, but it happens. And I pivoted to taking all those thoughts I was having about how things could be better in education using games, and created a lab that was funded by my mentor there, George Kosmetsky. He'd founded Teledyne in the 60s. He was always looking for ways to apply new technologies, and created a research agenda with that funding around learning, massive multiplayer technology, and artificial intelligence. And I didn't know a lot about AI, and I think almost nobody did, other than conceptually things happening with AI. But it happened to be at UT where I was. We were known for having the world champion IBO. So those are the little Sony robot dogs, the IBO Cup competitive teams. So we put together this interdisciplinary group of people in education sciences, information sciences, computer science, uh, and a particular artificial intelligence researchers, and then people I knew from the game industry. And we mixed everybody up in this lab that we created at UT. And out of that, we did some, I think, important fundamental work. Created some spin-offs of commercial games, content for commercial games, and then created this platform for the military, and wanted to continue studying that. Um, at that time, there was an opportunity to fund the first graduate degree program for games, for game development, and to take these research topics as an agenda and create the kind of inaugural research agenda for this new program. So I moved from Austin to Dallas and co-created the Guildhall at SMU, which was the first and continues to be one of the top ranked programs for game development in the world. And From there, a couple years later, of feeling like I'd accomplished the mission of setting up these research agendas, having impact in people's lives for all this work that we'd done, and creating a conduit for undergraduates to now go to a graduate program that was tied in with the game industry very closely. So we're able to begin really not just improving those learners' lives, but improving the game studios and game companies where they went to work, because you have people now who have been specifically trained in these roles and to think about games in a more kind of structured sense than what had evolved from just within the industry. So that mixing of ideas, I think, was really powerful, which is when I joined at Gearbox at a time that the company was wanting to begin launching new original IP, and Borderlands came from that. Did that 17 years. That's a whole, we don't have time to get into all that because I started there as a senior and executive producer, but what we did was so far beyond creating a particular game, a particular IP, or what became the franchise. We did so much more than that in terms of good work about treating people with respect, giving them a great place to work creatively, and letting their ambition be rewarded, and to show the rest of the game industry a model for how to do that. I felt very good about what we accomplished there. And fast forward 17, 18 years, and I'll kind of want to go back and look at some of these core research topics again and invest my time more fully into those, and that brings me to A&M. So I don't know how replicable that path is, but I'd love to believe that young people, if they follow their follow their heart, follow their mind, if they have a North Star that guides them, I think that they'll that will lead them to a good place.
Well, thank you for all the work that you've done in laying the foundation so that future game developers can do that successfully, and for all your efforts in making meaningful game-based learning for the learners of this generation and the next one. It sounds like you have accomplished a whole lot in making a huge impact. And what you'd set out to do was make an impact to help people. And you've done that with something that I think a lot of people take for granted with games and what that can turn into. So thank you for all that you've done. I know that there are educators out there listening, and maybe some students will end up hearing this podcast as well. I have two last questions for you. If you were to tell a student out there something they should focus on now if they want to be a game developer, what would you tell them?
That is a great question. I think young people now have tools available to them that I would have only dreamed to have available to me. I would say So first we have to acknowledge game development. One is many different disciplines. So I can't provide one bit of advice I think that applies uniformly across all those. And we also have to acknowledge that AI and automation are things that exist. Um, so I'd say first, in terms of the discipline, um, you you have the opportunity to have your game idea experienced by a lot of people. Um, and whether you're interested in the technology of engineering or underpinnings of, say, game-based learning and applications of math or physics, which either can apply straight to entertainment or to an education context. There's a lot of value and a lot of need for that. And if your interest is art and animation, we need beautiful art and animation, especially those that have a human crafted feel to them more than ever. Um, and so there are valuable things for you to do there. With that, you also need to be very savvy about where we are, where things are progressing with technology, where they're not, as well, and tools that you can use and should learn to use with automation that can help you go further faster are good things for you to know, but you still need a solid foundation. Without the foundation, everyone will end up with the same skill set, right? If you try to gloss over or jump past the hard work of building your foundation, you'll end up with the same skill set as everybody else who has the same general ideas that you have. What's going to set you apart are your particular ideas and ability to execute on those ideas, digging into a solid foundation. um, AI is going to continue to advance, but the ability of AI to advance is in no way a replacement for what you have up here and in here. And so you need to lean into your thinking and your creativity and your research, and don't rely on a machine to do any of those things for you. Um, and you'll find your way. Just be aware, be savvy, and build your foundation and be creative. You'll find very good outcomes for yourselves, I think, if you do those things.
I think that's fantastic advice, and also reassuring to teachers who are listening that your job is not being replaced by AI. Building that strong foundation, especially of math, I think you would agree, is so valuable. So those all those things have a purpose. So be
Yeah.
good in school,
Let me,
study
if I
hard.
could, and I know we're running late, I would just say real quick
Okay.
on the math topic. Um, it's not just the math, right? It's the mathematical thinking and logic.
Yes.
And what I see happening around us right now is, I this could be hyperbole. I don't know. This is an area we haven't researched. I'm really interested in this. Is there a decline in mathematical thinking and logical, um, reasoning in some of the systems we see that may be failing us? And I think the
Mm.
answer is probably yes. And I think maybe we're not collecting all the right kinds of data to be thought of logically. So the math itself is very important, but so are things like algebraic thinking, and the systems that we build for games lean heavily into linear algebra, linear systems. So those are not going anywhere, and we need more people, not fewer, who are masters of that craft.
That is such a great distinction and good point. It's I would think these days a lot of kids are so quick to think, "Oh, there's a problem. Ooh, I'm not sure I know how to do this." And so they look for other resources to help them solve it than just thinking critically that they can solve it too. So thank you for clarifying that. So one last question for you. What is your favorite video game?
Oh gosh, that's actually probably the hardest question that you've asked me. Um, hmm.
I'm sure it's changed over
It
years
it
and
has it
seasons.
has changed over the years. At one time, I would have told you Pitfall 2. at a different time, I'd have told you probably Zelda Ocarina of Time. Um, uh, I, I'll be honest, I actually play a lot of Call of Duty, and the reason is I
Right.
really enjoy um, mixing it up with and I totally play with random people online because I want to find out. We play in squads, and I enjoy creating the connection with other people that's mission based and highly competitive. And is the moment it's like when I was on a playground as a kid. I totally feel like I'm playing the floor is lava with other 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds on the dangerous playgrounds we played on as children. When I get into a competitive match like that, and what I enjoy even more than that is when my kids ask me to play competitive games with them that have team structure in them. And so we do that in Fortnite, and we do that in, um, uh, you know, simple physics-based games as well, like Gang Beasts, if you've heard of that. Really simple, but they're just so
Mhm.
fun, party game type games, but things that where we get to be social and have a goal and missions and talk to each other about what's happening in the game. I love games like that.
That's a great answer. My kids do play Gang Beasts, so I'm aware of that one.
Yeah.
And my only connection to Call of Duty is actually the image of Call of Duty, which has the soldier with just his eyes showing and just his helmet
Yep.
over the bunker. So he was actually a fellow student with me at Texas A&M, a fellow aerospace engineer. So he ended up becoming an actor or something like that. But anyway, that's my only connection. That as an Aggie aerospace engineer that's on the cover of Call of Duty. He's a friend of
That's
mine.
awesome. That's a great story. That's a good
Yeah,
connection.
yeah. So thank you so much, Aaron, for joining us. I know we went long today, but I so appreciate you sharing all of your wisdom and experience and for what you're doing at Texas A&M and all of the other places that you've been and laying the groundwork for other people to live their game developing dreams and to promote some game-based learning that makes such a huge impact in the lives of others.
Thank you so much for having me on, and my door's always open. If you have more questions or if any of the listeners are interested, please reach out. We love talking about these things and want to expand, the impact that we can have.
Thank you so much. Well, we'll leave some links in our show notes about how others who are interested can contact you and other resources that you have shared. So thank you.